And good afternoon, everybody. As we head into Vicious Circle, sorry I'm a little bit late. It's fucking how it goes sometimes. Yesterday was a long day. We're going to just dive right into the reading because I don't want to fuck around too much. And I know Ruddy here, who's here in Discord with me. If you want to join discord.gg/DGQC, you can join live and yell at me and ask questions, all that fun stuff. Verbally, rather than through text, as you people here in YouTube do. But since they've got to run. We have made our way through to the next part of chapter 3. For those of you who need like a minor sort of explanation of this last little bit, I would highly suggest you go back and just listen to last week's reading, which closes out the previous section talking about the circle becoming a reference unto itself, or that signification becomes signification of itself, and how meaning shifts in this high tonality, this mood, this ecstatic mood, this ecstasy of things that Nietzsche experienced, brought about, blah, blah, blah. How it functions, how it doesn't function, how you don't control it, all these fun things. I'm not going back over all that. There's a reason that we have sections and there's a reason we have recordings. So please go back and check that out. This week, however, we are diving into the elaboration of the experience of the eternal return as communicable thought. This is actually going to be running through how it becomes something to be communicated. And by it, I mean the circle itself, the eternal return itself, how it moves from this exceptionally high tonality where it's referring only to itself, all the way through to now I'm reading a book out loud to you. We are communicating about it. How the fuck does that happen? So let's dive in and find out, I guess. The elaboration of the experience of eternal return is communicable thought. The very first version Nietzsche gives in The Gay Science, aphorism 341, of his Silmaria experience, like those presented later in Zarathustra, is essentially expressed as a hallucination. At that very moment, the moment itself seems to be reflected in a flash of mirrors. It is the self, the same self, that awakens to an infinite multiplication of itself and its own life, while a kind of demon, like a genie in 1001 Nights, reveals to it, "You will have to live this life once more and innumerable times more." The reflection that follows declares, if this thought gained possession of you, it would make of you an other. We don't really need to go through the aphorism. It's a pretty simple aphorism, and it's a famous one. You can go check it out. It is the eternal return, and this is one of those passages that people tend to take the cosmological understanding of the eternal return and sort of run with it. A genie appears to Nietzsche's like, hey, what if these next moments you had to repeat forever? What if that was like a curse of sorts or a wish of sorts? You write your own fiction. If you had to live this many thousands or millions of times, what would you do? The way that this goes about it is talking in a very particular way. Let's do the thing. We're going to talk about this in line by line. So when we talk about it being essentially expressed as a hallucination, it is worth saying, all of this in this sort of section here. Why is this not showing up as highlighter? where is this? Why is this not working? Wrong display. There it is. And it is, that's fine. Okay. Um, um, it's worth talking about how Nietzsche is trying to get this across, because that is what the coming paragraphs are going to be about is, again, utilizing the eternal return, the vicious circle itself, as a system of communicable thought, of a system of incommunicable thought that's being applied to communicable thought. So as we go through this, and it's going to be the entire reading today is going to make our way through most of this, be thinking about how Nietzsche, who experienced this is the first thing he wrote post-Silmarie, understand the evolution of how he's trying to communicate using the experience of the eternal return to get across the experience of the eternal return in a way that's communicable. And successes or failures, or the growth of it, I think might be the phrasing. The growth of how that changes over time might be the way to sort of phrase it. Because up front, Nietzsche does not talk about it as a rational thing. Like, he goes straight at hallucinations. And it's important to do that, and it's important to understand this for the kind of the rest of Nietzsche's interpretation of it. The Greatest Weight, which is 341 in Gay Science, worth reading. I do like that it's called a genie. Klossowski calls it genie. Every translation I've ever seen into English calls it a demon. But a djinn is basically that. It's an odd little switch, but it is important. It's going to be important. It's going to be important. But the idea is that Nietzsche presents this demon's declaration as a thought experiment, a hallucinatory one. But Nietzsche's not doing this on his own. Klossowski's reading this as a phenomenological report of this intensive experience itself. That what Nietzsche's communicating to us, what he's writing in this, is itself kind of it's what it feels like, it's what it seems, it's an intensive thing itself. And by calling it a hallucination, it's outside sort of the normal rules of everything. It gives Nietzsche a little bit more room in order to play with it. We talked about this before, the way that how this is discussed and how we can talk about this in a way that allows us more play in the words. This is the last section that Klossowski was writing about. By being able to use these terms in a way that steps just outside of general consensus or general understanding or the code of everyday signs, which is going to be super, super important. By saying hallucination, Nietzsche is able to get around the idea of whether or not the experience is true or false, or the idea is true or false, but instead allows it to operate in the register of affects directly. And these affects that precede rational thought become what we're playing with. It's worth noting the German is Daemon. Well, isn't that demon? I thought it was demon. But genie is how Klossowski is translating it, which is, again, fascinating.
Yes and no. It's specifically, I mean, it seems like it's specifically referring back to the history of the sort of the Greek daemon, right? Which, you know, Socrates' daemon, all that, it's.
Ooh. I didn't know that. Let me make a note of such a thing. If it's going back to that, then that actually would make a lot more sense to. Demon in parlance, the way we use it, is extremely fraught with Faustian bargains, right?
Yes.
So like a demon will come and offer us a thing, but it's not just offering us a thing. There's ties to it. The demon has ulterior motives. A djinn would not.
Yeah, and a daemon is sort of a messenger from the underworld that's sort of a bridge between, gods and humans and the otherworldly and the humans. So Jin isn't quite it, but it gets across some of the. I think it could get across some of what's being played out there, but it's not exactly on.
No, it's not. It's but it's interesting. I like interesting.
Its spirit would almost be more of a direct translation, like a spirit told him this.
Well, so and the phrase that he's using, and I'm just going to, because I think Rudd is generally right. 1001 Nights is an Orientalist take. I think that's very spot on. But again, Nietzsche was not, we'll say, free of Orientalism. I think would be a nice way to put it. Because I mean, he was pre-Said, so we're talking about like the understanding of these things was at that. It's interesting. It's an interesting consideration, actually. Hmm. Sorry, I'm taking a moment to be stun locked on this because I think it's fascinating. To just we'll get there because there's, again, he talks about it in just 2 sentences, but the thing that's worth noting here, the hallucination that is being expressed, and August, correct me if I'm generally wrong on this, but the demon declares to him this thought experiment and talks about the idea that you will be, if you were cursed to live today or this hour or the next moment for infinity, what would you do? Is kind of the core idea of it. The there's just so much said in this sentence. I'm trying to figure out how much actually matters to me. More or less, what Nietzsche does in this, and if you read it, and maybe we should fucking go read it. 1 second, let me pull up Cambridge. Do you have it on hand, August, by chance? Not Zarathustra.
No, I have my Stanford in front of me right now. But
Stanford?
Cambridge on.
Oh. Actually, I think I have my Stanford too.
It doesn't exist as a PDF, so.
It doesn't?
No, unfortunately.
Then I have it behind me in the wall. That's fine. I have Cambridge. It'll be fine. Let's see. Let's do that. Let's do 341. Nope. Not far enough. 3. Nope. Not far enough. Far down there. There we go. A little bit of dry mouth. 1 sec. Tea. All right, I'll give it a read. It's the heaviest weight. What if some day or night a demon were to steal into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, "This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once again and innumerable times again. There will be nothing new in it, but every pain, every joy, every thought, sigh, and everything unspeakably small or great in your life must return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Even this spider, this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I, myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned over again, and you with it, speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, "You are a god, and never had I heard anything more divine"? If this thought gained power over you, as you are, it would transform and possibly crush you. The question in each and everything: do you want this again, and innumerable times again, would lie on your actions as the heaviest weight? Or how well disposed you would have to become to yourself and to life, too long for nothing more fervently than for this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal. Fuck. Man, Nietzsche could write. Nietzsche could write. That's for sure. Fuck. Nietzsche could write. Sorry, 2 seconds. I got to take the PDF back off my fucking screen and uncover my notes and put everything back in place because I did a bunch of shit just now. Boop, 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 boop. All right. So Klossowski going over it. The discussion of it as a hallucination is entirely specific. And what if he came to you in your loneliest of lonelies? This sort of riddle-like nature of it is intended to be able to place it outside of that, the work of everyday signs. This is literally what the drive is there. Why did the fucking thing go all broken? God damn it. One sec. Unreal. It's fine. I'm undoing it anyway. 2 seconds. I gotta fix this. Fucking frustrating. I have my entire new setup I'm putting together for Anti-Oedipus that I'm ended up using for this, but it's still in process. So there's the and E. And yeah, those are kind of close enough, but it's not exactly right. Which is fine. So 2 seconds. OBS is unbelievable pain in the ass. Fuck. Come on, you stupid fucking thing. Move slightly. It is not wanting to do what I want it to do. Of course not. Fine, I'll just deal with it. Because it doesn't matter as much. Is that even... That's fine. That'll be fine. Fuck. Alright. Fucking OBS. Alright. It's a hallucination, spoken of, the way he words it. At that very moment, the moment itself seems to be reflected in a flash, échappé of mirrors. The phrasing around this entire thing at this point. The moment itself reflected in the mirrors, it is the self, the same self, that awakens to an infinite multiplication. Yeah, we'll do that. It is the self, the same self, that awakens to an infinite multiplication of itself, its own life. Well, a kind of demon... and it kind of goes on, but I want to stop actually because the self and the same self is kind of the big deal. The mirror reflecting to itself, a flash of mirrors, the self, the same self. This wording Klossowski's using is intended to evoke a very particular thing. Again, we just discussed in the last couple paragraphs. It's not linear reflection, the way that you look into a mirror, but instead recursive self-multiplication, again, to the point of absurdity or the loss of singular meaning in it. You can translate, and there's a reason that the word échappé, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly, it's a weird word. It doesn't really mean a flash. Because a flash in English has connotations of like a brightness or a moment of brightness. It's not really that. This is more glimpse with a vanishing as part of it, right? That you caught a glimpse of something out of your eye and then it vanished. This is kind of what échappé tends to mean. It is something that reveals itself but withdraws in that same moment. A thing that opens while it closes. It's meant to be a bit of a paradox temporality. Right? That moment, the moment itself. That moment itself. This is kind of that thing, the folding of time in and of itself that he's really pushing. Are you still looking up daemon? It looks like the German daemon means both daemon, how the Greek idea is, and demon, and they're not separate in German. Really? Of all the languages, German's the one who I'd think would have like some Demonsprache or Demonschmakel. Oh, wow. That's just those are two totally different things. I would assume some shit like that. It's not often you hear of a word in German that does the same shit. But here it's this infinite multiplication, right? This is the thing that we're talking about. What we might call intensive repetition instead of extensive reproduction. This is the thing that's pushing back on itself over and over and over. The mirror thing is big for that. And to continue, well, a kind of demon, like a genie in 1001 Nights, reveals to it, you will have to live this life once more, innumerable times. The reflection that follows declares, if this thought gains possession of you, it would make of you an other. The reflection that follows. When we're reading 341, Nietzsche reflects on it, like as it goes. What would you do? Blah, blah, blah. Would you not do this? Would you not say this? Would you not gnash your teeth? Would you not realize that? Or would you? And he kind of gives these other options. But it's very specific that this makes you a moment of understanding things at a profound level. That's the thing for Nietzsche that he's bringing out of this encounter with the demon. If you found this out, if this demon came to you, would you not just fucking completely change how, would it not just completely fuck with how you understood everything? Would this not completely break you? Would this not lie on you as the heaviest weight? How well disposed would you have to be to become to yourself and to life too long for nothing more fervently than for this ultimate eternal confirmation and seal? The play that he's talking about here is how this demonic thing, and for Klossowski, the reason that I think the reason he's using the jinn instead of the demon directly is the way that this thought sort of takes one over, the way that you become obsessed with it, the way that it may completely change you. The thought would actually gain you. The thought becomes you rather than you learning a thing or adding it into yourself. It would make you an other. I think that's the kind of the phrasing he's talking about here. Like, it can't be thought. The eternal return, as we were talking about it last week, and as Klossowski's bringing it out and how he understands Nietzsche's bringing it out, cannot be just sort of considered itself by a stable subject. The very act of thinking it, of going into that, dissolves your subjectivity itself. It would naturally create another. And this is, again, Klossowski throughout all of this is really trying to play with and explore this odd paradox that comes about. How can one appropriate this truth, the vicious circle, the eternal return? How can one appropriate this truth whose content is precisely the impossibility of one appropriating anything? That if there's no stable subjectivity, how can one appropriate it? That the subject who would comprehend this would become other and thus not be able to be comprehending it, yet a subject can comprehend it. This is like the whole thing that everyone's had to deal with since Kant. Like this is to me, this is something, Deleuze writes about this in Kant even a bit, because this is like the big deal. How can a subject be both constituting and constituted? How does that work? Well, Nietzsche answers it through how we're reading it with Klossowski here, is that ultimately there is no stable subject. There are only intensive flux. And these flux coalesce into metastable identities. The eternal return is the thought of this process. But undergoing that thought is the very dissolution it is describing. So, understanding this necessarily breaks with traditional Understanding subjectivity makes you another, but as you grasp it, the thought of grasping it is the thing that is actually happening. I swear I don't do acid before these readings. It's just genuinely that, like, yeah, thought understood as a totality, bodily, forceful, identity destroying. Mike M says it could be comprehended if subjectivity itself is incomplete or transductive. As a, if you mean by SEMO, you left out the and then. Yeah, there we go. Then yes, I mean, there's a reason I use the word metastable in there. Yes, I think this is Klossowski's very much reading this through that. I think it's very Simondonian, but again, this is the thing that Klossowski's exploring, and he sees in Nietzsche, and I think a lot of people around him or in this tradition saw in Nietzsche. And it's exactly that the subject doesn't survive because there really isn't one, that the eternal return, the experience of it, is the thought of the very dissolution of the subject that can't perceive it, but also reveals the process that causes it's that shit. That's how I read the shit, at least. Like, yeah, it's a paradox, but it's also not a metaphysical thing, right? Not here, not for Klossowski. This isn't like a metaphysics. This is a much more of a phenomenological take, because again, this is not the demon conversation. A lot of people read that and they run with it. I get it. I'm not saying it's a wrong interpretation. I just prefer Klossowski's myself. A lot of people read that and they go, oh, so it's saying that we are in a circular universe, or that the universe repeats, or that this is what the eternal return is that everything comes back. When he says everything comes back, it means that, like, you get to the end of time and it starts again and it's linear and this. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. But this isn't cosmological theory to be proven or refuted. That's not it. The thing that's happening here is an intensive experience with effects that are transformative for the subject as an existence. So you go from, in the example we just went through, the 341, you go from this hallucination that is like this multiplication of mirrors of self-referentiality and self-reflection to almost absurd ends, with this demon or jinn showing up and saying, hey, this moment is going to be forever. And by knowing it, this transformation, by realizing this transformation is about a process, not a doctrine. As I read it again, pretty much you can always put that everywhere. And as we go, again, remember, this is how Klossowski's reading just this, but this is like early great Nietzsche, well, mid-world great Nietzsche. Gay Science is some of his best work, but he wrote profoundly tons of stuff following this. But it does sort of reverse his entire corpus from being a cosmological, larger scale philosophical argument. This is a thing not talking about really a concept. It's experiential. It is immanent. It is part of not the traditional philosophical or philological thing that is playing with a logically consistent whole, which is, as Nietzsche's writing this, we're a decade or two away from, the logicians taking over, and Bertrand Russell and logical positivism and all this other shit. That philosophical thing, that's great, but that's not really what he's playing with here. It's about intensive states. It's playing in a different direction. And that's, I think, going to be where we end up heading to this next paragraph. This is how I understand this paragraph. And again, from here, I should just have that on the screen. This is how I understand it. Fuck off if you disagree, or let me know. Like, I have no interest in there's a truth here. I wish Klossowski was there to explain stuff, but other than that, this is called interpretation. Yeah. Comments, questions on this before we move to the next sort of, I don't know. We're going to do a couple paragraphs here. This is, the style here starts pushing us in a way, for me, that is, we'll do little bits at a time, but we'll make our way through. All right. Interpreters being called to action. If you're not living your best life, you better get off your ass and start living it. Well, that's, again, if you want to talk about this in this metaphysical, this is the grounding, this is the setup. Klossowski's argument is it's deeper than that, and it's more complex than that. What we're talking about when it's like the demon shows up, it's not a call to live your best life, because this would be the doctrinal take that I think specifically Klossowski's going against, and I tend to be against it. The idea of Nietzsche ever having a doctrine feels weird to me as like a thing. It's always felt weird whenever people talk about, well, Nietzsche wants us to do this, and it's like, whew, it sits in me funny, I think would be the phrasing. Instead, think of it as, if this happened, what does this mean fundamentally for how you came about? If this moment is live forever, you've already done that. First off, you've already lived it forever. So living your best life, what does that even mean at this point? Because you're repeating the thing that just came before, because this includes the demon. How do you know this is this is the first time you've gone through it? How do you know you're not, I don't know, pick a fucking sci-fi movie. Moon, great example. How do you know you're the fucking first clone, or the real one, or the last one? How do you know any of these things? How do you set yourself up for this and go, oh yeah, no, I just have to live my best life? What if instead it's deeper? What if instead the question is, if you've lived this, then where does you come from? If this is a thing you've done before, where does you come from in this? The nature of this very thing itself shifts a lot. It's not about external facts. Oh, you're living all of this all over again. But instead, it's about internals. You are living this all over again, and you are brought about by the things around you and through that. So you yourself are fundamentally different than you understood. There's a weird temporality to the moment as it folds back on itself, a hall of mirrors. It's not this moment unto itself. It's an infinitely recursive moment. Every moment is infinitely recursive unto itself, which means that there is no before or after, which means there is no live your best life, because what are you comparing it to? The last thing you did, but you just did that. You just did the same thing. What if
there isn't the same you to even live
there isn't even the same exactly
life. Yeah.
And because the identity there, the you, is an effect of the optics, is an effect of these mirrors, right? So you may see these intensive forces produce things, and you have this self that sort of appears through it, but the self that appears through it, that's effect. That's not grounding. That's not substantial ground to sort of stand on. And then at the very end of it, the whole point would be that thought itself, as he talks about it, would not this thought grip you? And that's how the passage ends for Nietzsche. Wouldn't the thought, as you really grasp it, and when he means that, he means not just, oh yes, no, intellectually I'm understanding the order. No, the moment you understood, and it sort of was integrated into how you understood the world, the idea would possess you. And that's because ideas don't supplement your subjectivity. They reconstitute subjectivity itself. It isn't that you have a grand idea that you're thinking and you're like, oh, I am feeling enlightened because of this idea. The idea fundamentally reconstituted your subjectivity to put you in that position. Would feeling like you're falling in love be kind of like this? When you can't tell if you've... Actually, Zizek writes about that very nicely, of all fucking people. And I say that my wife got me a Christmas gift because she thought it was funny. It's a Zizek vaporwave shirt. Falling in love for Zizek, and I'm now outside of Klossowski, so this doesn't apply to the reading. I'm just taking a moment. The falling is the constitutive part. That the fundamental thing that happens is that subjectivity gets fundamentally altered in that. So yes. Olivia, specifically to your question, the idea here is one talking about the experience of the eternal return, but the experience of the eternal return, the way that it comes about, the understanding of this hyper self-referential, internally consistent, but externally completely broken logic that somehow exists within it, where signs reference themselves, where the self references itself, where things no longer have any, concordance with the everyday signs that's sort of outside of it. Fundamentally, this understanding, this thought of the vicious circle, bleeds into you and can never go away again, because it fundamentally changes how you understand yourself and how you are constituted. This would be across the board then. This would apply to almost everything in that way. Nobo Daddy says, is it wrong to see a connection here to death drive and the dissolution of the ego's constructive involvements in the world? I don't think it's going to be I'm going to be very specific in my answer here. Depending on how you understand the death drive, and there's a lot of interpretations that are very nuanced in difference between them. But as a generality, the idea that the breaking down of things gives birth to new, that the drive towards, or the acceptance of the death drive, or the acceptance of destruction. This is my preferred understanding of it is obviously anti-Oedipus. The death drive is built into all of us, and it is the fact that death is constantly part of everything that we're doing. The small things that come together die and go away. We live an ephemeral, liminal life that is constantly being sort of died on all sides. And this is the beauty. The beauty is not nihilism, that everything dies. It's that those deaths enable more births. And so, yes, this ties into those things. For Klossowski, I know it does. But just saying, like, this, for me, ties into those things as well. Yeah. This thought is loosely what brought me seriously tearing with philosophy. You are not alone. You are not alone. The experience is, for me, the reason I'm here for this, for sure. So emphasis more on the reconstituting process? No. It isn't really emphasis on the reconstituting. The death drive as a thing is the acceptance of a process ending. And the knowledge that things end, and it's not emphasis on the reconstituting, it's the ending, the allowance of that. Because everything's always ending. Everything. Which means everything's also always born. They come together. It shifts how the meaning works. We're not far away from being able to talk about it, so I kind of want to get to it, because the thing that's coming up here that we're going to be chatting about just in sort of a moment is Zarathustra's version of this. We're about to sort of get into, because now we're going through and talking through how Klossowski reads all of the appearances of the eternal return. So let's figure it out. There is no doubt that Nietzsche here is speaking of a return of the identical self. This is the obscure point that was the stumbling block both to his contemporaries and to posterity. From the outset, this thought was commonly considered to be an absurd phantasm. Do I want to? Yes, I do. Boy, that line, the identical self. This is how Nietzsche talks about it. And again, we just read it. It is playing with this, and it's Nietzsche means the same self, and that the same self returns identically. This seems to contradict everything we've talked about. On the surface, it kind of does, but that the phrasing for Nietzsche, the infinite mirror, right? The mirror multiplication, but also the becoming other. Again, Klossowski's going very, very far out of his way to sort of talk about the phenomenological content of the actual hallucinatory experience, the first one. This is how this thing appears to consciousness. Klossowski's not trying to get at the ontological truth of any of this. He's trying to get across that Nietzsche was writing and trying to communicate an experiential element of this thing and this odd moment he came to and this odd knowledge he came to that exploded and carried across everything. And that communication is something that you can completely have ruined by people who try to find the truth in it. Oh, he's talking about this thing that is fundamentally true and always true. No, not really. To just steal one of my favorite lines, do not mistake my finger for the moon I'm pointing at. Would be, I think, another way of the thing. Fingers pointing at the moon. Wei Wu Wei, fantastic book. Also Bruce Lee, but Wei Wu Wei first. Also Bruce Lee, though. So in this, just these two sentences, and they're across pages, so I can't really show both of them, I don't think. Does that show up decently? I don't think it does. I don't think that's readable to anybody who's not broken. That should be okay. You can read both of them maybe there. This seems like an odd thing to bring up, and there's a lot of very specific stuff that we sort of just went through that sort of have to be teased out before we move into Zarathustra. Because the thing that he's talking about here, this phantasm, there is an ambiguity to it. It is an unconscious thing, and it isn't a blind spot. These things, this is the obscure point, the stumbling block of his contemporaries. The thing it seemed to do is to commit Nietzsche to this crude cosmological claim that identical atoms, how people contemporaneously understood, and I think still do, understand the universe is by saying, oh, it is this ordered thing. There's the scene in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, also the book, but in the movie, where they literally reconstruct Earth perfectly, and they do it atom by atom, and it takes off in that last moment when it shouldn't have. There you go. Sorry to ruin a movie and a book for you, but that's a very specific understanding of what it means for the same to return. That these identical atoms, identical elements at this tiniest level have identical configurations. And this seems to contradict this anti-metaphysical project that Nietzsche's been on always. This is Nietzsche's thing, is like, fuck metaphysics, more or less. I'm making it a bit crude. And so people basically have either dismissed the eternal return as this weird mysticism, eat shit Kaufman, or they sort of reinterpret it as sort of a thought experiment. And Klossowski's like, how about neither? What if we were to take this return of the identical self absolutely seriously? And let's add in the seeming paradox that to have the return of the identical self requires the dissolution of selfhood. This paradox doesn't have a traditionally logical outcome, but you can undergo it. You can experience the paradox. And that is, that's a beast of a thing to say. It's a beast of a thing to say. From the outset, this thought was commonly considered to be an absurd phantasm. Specifically, phantasm is a Klossowskian, if there is like jargony words for Klossowski, it's phantasm. Fantasy would be the other side with the PH. It's a whole tradition there of a thing. And he's agreeing, he'll agree with this. Klossowski so far has been agreeing with this. The thought is this absurd phantasmatic thing. Phantasm being a particular place in his semiotic structure. But only when you translate it to this doctrinal form that people have taken it from. And the scandal is that trying to communicate this intensive experience through coded language of everyday signs, you'll find those things can't accommodate the experience. So the absurdity is structural. The absurdity is not a failure of Nietzsche's writing or his own writing. I'm not really sure how to make sense of the return of the identical self. It seems like you're saying it can't be made sense of. It can't be made sense of through the language that selfhood requires in the code of everyday signs. But it makes sense experientially perfectly. To me, at least. This is, again, and I think to Klossowski. I think this is Klossowski's argument. Let's get to Zarathustra. We're going to move forward. I'm not going to stop yet. We're going to get through this because I think specifically August, I think the answer to your question is going to be right there. Okay. Zarathustra considers the will as being enslaved to the irreversibility of time. Let me zoom in on this. Why am I zoomed out? This is the first reflective reaction to the obsessional evidence. Nietzsche, therefore, seeks to grasp the hallucination once more at the level of conscious willing through an analytic cure of the will. What is the relationship of the will to three-dimensional time, past, present, future? Not three-dimensional time as you might understand it otherwise. When we talk about it here, he means past, present, future, the three dimensions of time, not three-dimensional and time. Going to be important for a lot of these guys. The will projects its powerlessness on time, and in this way gives time its irreversible character. The will cannot reverse the flow of time, the non-willed that time establishes as an accomplished fact. This produces, in the will, the spirit of revenge against the unchangeable and a belief in the punitive aspect of existence. Zarathustra, that I'm definitely not going to read here because I think it will end up confusing things. I'm just going to go with it, and you can go read Zarathustra on your own. Yeah, this paragraph is fucking crazy dense. Every one of these paragraphs is psychotically dense. It's crazy dense. But this one is particular. If you haven't read Zarathustra, you should. It's actually really good. Klossowski is unlike a lot of people who tend to think that, oh, well, the idea of the eternal return changed depending on how he was writing it, or Nietzsche was working with it before he came up with, and Klossowski's like, no, he's using these various ways to describe it, to describe this absolutely affective or intensive experience that the code of language doesn't work for. So let's open up. Zarathustra considers the will as being enslaved to the irreversibility of time. Zarathustra gave a speech on redemption. It's part two. Um, he diagnoses the wills, and with will to power, the will, the force, the impulses, desire, libido, whatever. It's powerlessness before the past. When we just read from Nietzsche before, when he said that there would, if once you grasp it, would there not be gnashing of teeth? The will's gnashing of teeth and secret melancholy. The identical wording is used here for Zarathustra. And for Klossowski, he sees this moment specifically as another reflection on this hallucinatory experience, on this odd thing that Nietzsche went through. Because, and the sequence is really, really important. He has, writing wise too, he has this intensive hallucination that he writes about in his letters. He attempts to understand it through a more philosophical analysis in gay science. And he notices that the problems within it, because immediately people are talking about, and he writes about this elsewhere too, that immediately people are taking this as cosmological truism. It was popular at the time to do such a thing. And so he writes it differently here. He shows up and he tries to write it differently. This is a secondary reflection on this. And the phrasing that is really great that Zarathustra is using. Zarathustra considers the will as being enslaved to the irreversibility of time. There is a structure of the reactive consciousness where ressentiment is born. The will, the forces that make you up, the impulses that make up you and experience, right? They define themselves against time. Time is particularly unidirectional, generally speaking. Not getting into that. By being unidirectional and by time passing, the will is only able to react to it. It's only able to produce resentment towards existence itself. This spirit of revenge, and again, this is Zarathustra's section here on redemption, is sort of about this. The core for Nietzsche of the spirit of revenge is here. It's not a psychological bitterness. Okay, I went into this into my resentment. This is not just a guy being kind of bitter. This is an ontological structure of how consciousness itself relates to time itself. Yes. This is the first reflective reaction to the obsessional evidence. Obsessional evidence, what a phrase. There's a compulsion. We talked about this for the eternal return. And when you mentioned the death drive, someone in YouTube mentioned that. The obsessional thing, the thing that happens, that the thought that attaches to you, forces you to become other, that breaks these things, that becomes center of it, this thing will not stop returning. It is repetition compulsion itself. But if you combine that with subjective certainty, right? This obsessional evidence. Oh, it's such a fucking good phrase. Right? Oh, it's such a good phrase. Evidence is in emphasis, italics here, for a very particular reason. Because evidence, you wouldn't put it in quotes. It wasn't really the style of the time. This certainty that he's got, this obsessional evidence, the certainty can't be validated through evidence. You can't. The whole thing returns and comes back, and it's almost neurotic. It's like a neurotic symptom in traditional psychoanalytic thought, right? It's this repetitive pattern that can't be integrated and can't be discharged. It is obsessional. And the evidence, the phrasing of evidence is just so good here. Nietzsche therefore seeks to grasp the hallucination once more at the level of conscious willing through an analytic cure of the will. The first thing he did is Nietzsche's tried to recover this intensive experience through conceptual language of everyday signs, through volitional categories, through a demon coming to you and blah, 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 right? But conscious will is what the hallucination dissolves. And so by attempting to appropriate the eternal return through willing, generates this performative contradiction that is clear in the language of the thing itself, that create the experience itself that is at the foundation of generating these sentences and generating him building this is Klossowski's argument. This is Nietzsche trying to bring out all of this. And the phrase analytic cure of the will, I fucking love Klossowski. And there's a reason I've been talking about like the neurotic and all this. This is the analytic cure of the will. Klossowski will say not a fan of psychoanalysis, right? We'll just say that. He wasn't like super against it, but like, the analytic cure, the talking cure, the patient on a couch sitting and talking for 60 minutes, 90 minutes with the timer in the background, separated from the entire world. But this is not just psychological for Klossowski. To him, this is like a metaphysical commentary. Psychoanalysis treats the neurotic symptom by uncovering its origins and symbolic truths and unconscious realities and stage plays and all that. And Nietzsche's trying to do kind of the same thing. He's attempting to cure the will's reactive structure through his own philosophy by revealing this temporal genesis of it. But the analogy he creates naturally just has limits in it. It just has limits. Psychoanalytic cure aims at ego strengthening for a reason. The Nietzschean cure, what he's trying to do is the opposite. It's trying to dissolve selfhood. He's trying to communicate that out. Fuck. This breaks things. This is a breakdown. It doesn't function the way that sort of the experience does, the entire thing. So he says, and again, time this was written, time of a lot of things. The three-dimensional time is a very particular phrasing, just so you know. I'm not fucking getting into the history of it, so don't get on me about the science of it. That's not the conversation. What is the relationship of the will to three-dimensional time, past, present, future? The will projects its powerlessness on time, and in this way gives time its irreversible character. We'll get to the rest of it in a second. I kind of want to stop there. The question is not what is time. That's it. Klossowski doesn't give a fuck about that. And in fact, I don't think Deleuze does either. Deleuze just answers it as well. This is a thing I love about these guys. They just answer it and then they run with it. The question is more, what is the relationship of the impulses, the will, desire, to time? What's the relation that's happening here? What is the existential question, not really the ontological or metaphysical truths? The thing he's playing with, past, present, future. It's post-Kant. Time is incredibly important to all of these guys for a whole bunch of various reasons. Good work, Kant. It's a thing that he sort of went in there with the transcendental, as he does. But there's a little bit of a twist and a phrasing here that I think is interesting. And it's three-dimensional time, which I think evokes Kant and a whole bunch of stuff, but plays with it in a Nietzschean way. The phrasing and how he's talking about this is not necessarily that time has these things or that time is the eternal truth. That's not it, right? Instead, time's structure, not a priori, but instead time's structure is built by the will. It's produced by the operations of the will. Like time moves. That's kind of what he's saying here. Again, watch my video on resentment where I go through this. The present, like again, how we build the past, present, and future and how these things interact. How is this emergently coming about? Well, the will is doing what it's doing, right? The will cannot reverse the flow of time. Nothing really can, but also the will can't reverse the will. That's not really the thing that happens. The non-willed that time establishes as a fact, the past, this produces in the will the spirit of revenge against the unchangeable and a belief in the punitive aspect of existence in the now, which is then anticipatory of the future. Nietzsche goes over this extensively, Deleuze as well, But this is the important part. These things are built into each other. They're coextensively building on each other. Normally, we talk about time as being this irreversible movement of from the past, it goes to now to the future. We do this because we measure time in minutes. And so we can say 20 minutes ago, and then 20 minutes past, and then 20 minutes from now. I'm teaching my kid time right now. I know how a clock works. Like this. We have an analog clock even. If you can imagine what it's like. If you want a hopeless thing to look at and do and teach a child is an analog clock. It makes you go, what the fuck are you doing every day? But we have this image of time as being this constant thing that's irreversibly moving. Will can't really change that order of things, right? Will doesn't do that. By being powerlessness in the face of this seeming forward movement, frustration builds, resentment builds. But Klossowski asks, and we'll reread it in a second, but Klossowski asks, wait, through Nietzsche, I should say Nietzsche's asking, Klossowski's bringing out. Will experiences its own powerlessness because it experiences powerlessness in the seeming direction of time, not actually what time is, and it projects the powerlessness onto time. Time then appears irreversible. This appearance is the effect of the will's self-relation. The self-relation of the will and the understanding of its own powerlessness is what creates time as we understand it. Irreversibility is projected, by the way. Enjoy the implications of all of that. We'll get to them. It's a hell of a statement. But it's an important one. If irreversibility is projected and not really intrinsic, well then the eternal return is thinkable, not as a supernatural rewinding of time and starting over of the CD player, right? Then not that. That would be like the silly version of it. That's the silly version of it. That's the cosmological. Oh, Nietzsche's talking about how science works. And it's just a big crunch and big bang over and over and over. And we just recycle things. That's what Nietzsche's talking about. No. If time is reversible and irreversibility is projected, then it's actually, the eternal return is not this large cosmological thing, but instead it's about overcoming the will's reaction towards its own impotence of temporality. It is the will to power. Anyone who really is listening right now, who's totally read Nietzsche, just had a good moment, because this is a great moment for me. This is one of those big, like, oh, this is the will to overcoming the will to overcome. There's a fucking level of recursion in this writing that is absolutely insane, by the way. Because the eternal return offers a liberation, not changing how time flows, right? That's not the thing. Don't get me wrong here. You don't become Superman. That's not it. You can't run around the earth really fast to bring Lois back or whatever. That's not how it works. It's not about changing how time flows. It's changing the will's relationship to its own temporality and existence. It's kind of an amazing. I'm just going to let that sit for a second. So, relation to the third synthesis of Deleuze. Which third synthesis? He has like 6 syntheses. I mean, he does. Every one of his works is like a logic of blank. Oh, AOs. The conjunctive. Ye, mm, I'm going to say yes, but there's a huge goddamn asterisk there. It's really fucking crazy. I'm not even done with the paragraph. I know I pre-read it, but we're going to keep going. The will projects its powerlessness on time, and in this way gives time its irreversible character. Projecting its powerlessness. The phrasing here is very Freud. It's very, very psychoanalytic, and I adore this. But specifically, it's post-Kantian at the same time. Because he's talking about how the will is not receiving temporality from a temporal structure. There isn't time that the will receives from things. Again, the will, as it's creating, as it's emerging, as it's doing stuff, it constitutes time through projection, through this sort of odd self-concealment that's happening simultaneously along with this constitution of it. And in this moment, the will forgets how it constituted this and built this and experiences instead time as an alien thing outside of itself, over here, and I'm over here. And someone in chat, I mentioned this because someone's like, I think I can see Heidegger in here. Yes. Fallenness. Heidegger will call this fallenness very specifically. His thinking on time, fallenness. Sartre will go out and talk about bad faith. If you want to read kind of about this, it's not exactly this, but this is playing in the same sort of categories. Because what it is consciousness as a thing, as it's constituting the world, is almost taking flight from the freedom that it is constituting in itself. This is resentiment. Go watch my video on resentiment. It's incredibly important. It's a lot. But he says, the will cannot reverse the flow of time. The non-willed that time establishes as an accomplished fact. This produces in the will the spirit of revenge against the unchangeable, a belief in the punitive aspect of existence. Okay. The past appears to us to be fate. Like a done deed, a fact that is completed, done and sealed. The past is dead and buried. You can't change the past, son. The phrasing Nietzsche uses here is some fucking crazy German word. I have it written down as Vergangenheit. I hope I pronounced that even close to right. Vergangenheit. What has gone by, the thing that has passed. Pennsylvania Dutch grandparents. It's like the only language I can probably pronounce correctly because although I don't speak it, I heard angry grandparents. The past is not willed. It's non-willed in almost multiple senses. The present didn't choose the past. Agreed? I hope we agree on that. That's a basic thing we kind of, again, children learn about. But the present also resists the will's attempt to alter it. Right? But this non-willed appearance, and it is a fact produced by the will's projection. The past isn't really accomplished. It isn't over, but it appears so because the will, the impulses, don't seem to be able to have an effect on it. They relate to it as impotent. And that's the thing we teach early on, that you can't change the past. So the past feels like this thing that can't be altered, that can't be fucked with. So the will can't do anything with it. The will experiences it as absolute impotence. It experiences this interaction as impotence. And as such, resentment. There you go. The Vergangenheit. I think that's how you spell it. Yeah, that's how I have it written. I didn't probably put enough phlegm in it. So apologies to all my German friends. So this powerlessness builds this spirit of revenge. This is resentment, the super concept of Nietzsche that is incredibly important, the reactive consciousness. Because revenge is not like emotional. It's actually an ontological structure created in the process. And as such, the will takes revenge on time by declaring existence guilty. Resentment builds, just as a minor version. I think I actually have to say it. A lot of people don't understand it because it isn't just resenting someone. You can resent people for perfectly fine reasons that don't have to do with impotence. Impotence means you can't do anything about it. It doesn't mean that you have perceived impotence. It's a lack of accepting the powers that exist within you in various ways. So the example I always love using, because it's mostly an Aesop's fable, is a gigantic bald eagle sees deer in a field. I think you can say falcon and sheep. It doesn't really matter. Bird of prey and sheep. And the sheep are out wandering the fields. There's little baby sheep. And fucking eagle comes down and goes, swoop, grabs it, goes off, tears it into pieces, feeds it to its young. And the sheep looks up and goes, that fucking dick. If I could fly, I wouldn't eat his children. This is born, and this is a sentiment you see a lot, but it's born of impotence. The sheep can't do anything. The sheep can't do that. It can't stop the eagle. It can't do what the eagle does. They're not the same thing. They're not compossible as elements. The experience of this impotence creates resentment that gets phrased as, I can't. I wouldn't do that. I'm better. Because I can't do a thing, I'm better than the eagle. I am smarter. I am more kind. I'm wiser. That eagle takes advantage of everything he could do. You see this a lot with rich people. And again, I'm anti-capitalist. Fuck capitalism. But to just go, if I was Jeff Bezos, I would just give all my money to the poor. Great. Misunderstanding how everything comes together. If you're going to say that, and if you're going to go, therefore Jeff Bezos is evil. Material conditions are an important thing in the world. And that misunderstanding, that makes guilt in the other person and you good, even though you can't do the thing. You don't have the ability to do the thing. You claim you would if you could. You wouldn't. But you claim you would if you could, and therefore you're better for not having power. Nietzsche has a wonderful discourse on this, but this is an incredibly important specific thing. The will experiences this impotence. The impotence, instead of accepting, it experiences it as reaction. He is, though. No, he's not evil. Sorry, evil doesn't exist. That's a Christian concept. And if you want to talk about the devil and pitchforks, we can. I think it's funny that, you know, if you believe in that kind of thing, that you got a pitchfork. Is all the hay in hell? That's what you got pitchforks for? Is that the devil with a little tail? Right? Is that how it works? And horns. Sorry, horns as well, because horns, horny, sex, evil. Feel free to have that conversation. Jeff Bezos isn't evil. He is a material he's a material reality of the conditions of capitalism. But again, was Hitler evil? Hitler did a lot of awful things. Killing baby Hitler would not have stopped World War II. If you think Hitler's the reason World War II happened, I have a lot of books for you to read and a lot of reality to sort of ingest. If you think right now is only Trump, and if it just wasn't for Trump, we wouldn't have these problems. That woman would be alive yesterday. I've got a conversation to have with you. Yeah, zip code is an indicator of material conditions. The zip code you're born in determines more about your life than anything else about you, by the way. There's this weird fact of what your final income is going to be, determine it by the zip code you're literally born in. But does that mean that people born in that zip code were evil because they're born in that zip code? I guess. Again, evil is a concept we're supposed to be beyond by 150 fucking years at this point. 150 years. Is that beyond good and evil? 150 years ago? I want to say it was the 70s, 1870s. Jesus. And yes, August, Hitler was a remarkably unremarkable man. Did Nietzsche get that lamb bird of prey fable from Aesop? He didn't get it from Aesop. I just make a joke that it's basically that, because it's the point for Nietzsche to get this across is to understand that this is not a conscious thing of like, oh, I've built this, I understand how the world works. It's the opposite. It is the confrontation of the will with its own impotence. To overcome this barrier, because it doesn't accept it, it builds an understanding that I, myself, am good. I can't do that. Therefore, things who can't do that are good. Things who can are evil. You got something, August? August? Oh, you unmuted. Usually you don't unmute. Sorry. So yeah, it's a big deal here to talk about this, because the revenge as a thing can't be understood just simply as an emotion itself or an affective thing itself. It's a structure ontologically. And as such, the will, the impulses of time, the impulses of things, when confronted with time seeming irreversibility, or with the way that we understand things as having happened, we presume they can't be changed because they're spoken of as such. And when this happens, we have this collision, and that impotence that is experienced in that collision builds a mythology almost. It builds a structure, and that structure is one of, well, things that were done can't be changed. I'm impotent, therefore existence has a guilt to it. Existence is guilty. It deserves punishment. People deserve punishment who are bad. They did bad things. They're bad. This is
the thing I was going to say was,
please.
The phrase is, evil exists to make life blameworthy, right?
Yeah. I like that. I really like that. So again, this is the idea is this is a moral interpretation of existence, fundamentally. And this is kind of where this builds from. This is Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil. Go give it a read. It's great. It's great. It's great. Also, be clear, killing baby Hitler is counterfactual history. Just want to say that. It's literally asking to change the past. It doesn't matter. Again, that's not the point, Goddard. If baby Hitler had died in childbirth, like most children did at the time, and especially the region that he lived in, that wouldn't have stopped World War II. Like a bomb moving slightly over and accidentally hitting in World War I and killing his mother would not have changed World War II. Would not have changed the material condition that produced it. One man, the great man theory of things is bullshit. One man does not make things. That's not how it works. That's fascism. As we're seeing, by the way. So don't buy into it. Even on the opposite side, you're building fascism. Unchangeable is particular here. Actually, this might be worth taking a second on too. Because when we talk about time experiencing this as unchangeable, the revenge against the unchangeable, I think the way this comes about, and again, Nietzsche is generally speaking on a pretty significant polemic against what you might call the cultural reality of Christianity, the thing that it teaches. And here, this idea of the unchangeable is something that is not just Platonic, but excessively built into Christianity. There's a realm beyond time. And this thing that is created specifically for Nietzsche, this entire religious thing is created because will is powerless before change. And as such builds an unchangeable realm in order to, oh, that's great. I can do all sorts of things here. And that changeable stuff, that's again, it's the will falling back on itself. Will falling back on itself. The good and evil, sin, redemption, crime, punishment, all of those things is literally the moral Christian worldview. This emerges from this revenge structure. The entire eschatological framework of Christianity is this. Original sin It establishes past guilt. Last judgment is your future punishment. All of these things are built into how time operates and the revenge against it. It's an elaborative sort of nightmare of fighting time, battling time. And that's the phrase he says here at the very end. A belief in the punitive aspect of existence is kind of the deal here. Punishment itself, and this is, again, talk about global, but this is fundamental to American sort of, I speak as one, Western sort of understandings of everything, I guess, at this point. There is someone who is responsible for a thing. We have free choice, and we must get recompense for actions when people choose certain things. If you choose to do a thing, you get a fine. Choose to do a thing, you get punishment. You get thrown in jail. You get the death penalty. You chose to do this. You chose. But all of this is, again, arising from this overly simplistic response to the fact that will is projecting its structure onto existence. Existence to be meaningful. For existence itself to have meaning. Like, for example, suffering serves moral purpose. To have that, while simultaneously making it unbearable because we deserve suffering. Thus the existence, revenge on existence thing. This is the ascetic ideal. This is Nietzsche through and through, all of these things. Finding meaning in meaninglessness, ultimately, through this revenge logic. And when we talk about punitive justice systems, when we talk about retributive morality, social resentment, colonial or anti-colonial violence, all of these things is a will to revenge against the temporality of existence. All of it. Properly understood, the eternal return dissolves all these foundations of all punitive thinking, period. It doesn't work that way. Things don't work this way, I think I would phrase it. Shit, I moved too much. Things don't work that way. And so, to continue, one sec. Goddard, you are fascinating to me. Is it more accurate that the great man is less of a man, but a locus for whom people attribute their actions to? There's a Making of Great Men is a piece by, I don't want to get, I fucked this up the other day. Now everyone has gotten on my back. Yeah, it's Godelier. Good. Someone got on me because I think I said Grial the other day. The Making of Great Men, which I'm putting into the Discord right here. There's a Godelier piece. Phenomenal writing, by the way. But it's about sort of the way that male domination and power emerged emergently rather than determined by the sex or the birthright or whatever, but how these things are more emergent. Phenomenal read. Genuinely phenomenal read. Does in this book, Klossowski have a theory of power also? I'm referring to pouvoir. We will get there. It's not explicit, but Klossowski has answers, I think I would say, to the things he's putting out challenges for or saying that there's issues around. Certainly, I think that's a fair way to put it. Let's see, 140. Yeah, we can get through a couple more, I think, here. One sec. One sec. I'm taking the kids in like an hour and a half, so I just gotta prep myself. Okay, I just roll and peg a revision. Let's see. Goddard says, I advise to read Foucault. Once you understand the concept of power, you'll understand power is never situated. I would, I say this as someone who I think Foucault has a lot of good works. Anti-Oedipus has a much better take on how power actually comes to function that is much more emergent. Foucault's got a lot of issues around determinant positions. and a lot of assumptions. I prefer, as far as power goes, I prefer the actual commentary from Spinoza as the two forms of power. And it's a complex in English because in a lot of translations, they translate power as the ability to do something, the ability to, because the ability to do something, I have it in my power to do something. There's a difference between having the potentias, the potentiality to do something, or the potestas, which is the allowance to do something. Two different things that actually get merged together in a lot of Western writings, very sadly. Those two things come together to actually determine power. And I think it's a much more interesting sort of thing to tarry with. Jim and I asked, do you ever watch Wes C? I have no idea who that is. He's not very nuanced. I like his lectures. Doesn't have many views, which is a sign of good philosophy. Wes C. So I'll take a look. Again, I'm terrible to deal with, and I'm no fun to talk to. So most people don't want to do that. We'll see. I appreciate low rent. Low rent's good. It's a good sign. It's a good sign. So before we move to the next little bit, because I think it's important for us to actually continue to move. What is happening here methodologically with Klossowski? And it's going to be important in the next couple paragraphs leading into next week as well. I tried watching Wes, but it was too slow for the stream. Oh, I remember this. I think I ended saying this seems completely fine, but I can't, I just feel like I'm stealing content because it's slow and it's, yeah. I'll give it another try. Yeah, Godelier. You can also join our Discord, and I just posted the PDF. Highly recommend. It's a short read. It's not a very long one, and I think he does an exceptional job explaining how great men come about. And again, I'm saying that with a sarcastic bent. There's no such thing as great men. It's a social construct emergently born out of social interactions and power structures. But for Klossowski, and we're going to see this as we keep going, what he's doing in all of this, in Nietzsche's philosophical texts, he sees them as symptoms themselves, that they are attempts to articulate an experience that exceeds the linguistic conceptual capture of the code of everyday signs. He finishes this, and he says it over and over, this obscure point. He phrases this. He's talking about these things over and over and over. And I think it's incredibly important to be remembering that this is what he's driving all of these things very much through. The idea that this is actually a demonstration or a performative adaptation of the will. Because, and this is why, Zarathustra's remedy is to re-will the non-willed, inasmuch as he desires to assume the accomplished fact himself, thereby rendering it unaccomplished by re-willing it innumerable times. Such a ruse removes the once and for all character from the event. This is the subterfuge the experience of Silmarie, which is in itself unintelligible, first offers to reflection. This reflection consequently hinges on willing. Okay. Nietzsche in Zarathustra's proposed sort of intervention on things is to re-will the non-willed. But how can one will what was never willed in the first place? This is again, contradiction built in, the paradox built in. The whole thing is a question about that. It's re-willing. We've already talked. The will didn't make the past the thing. The past appears non-willed precisely because the present did not choose it. Yet you're going to retroactively will this unwilled past. It seems absurd. it seems absurd on its face, right? And that's, again, going to be kind of the point. It's Nietzsche's making these moves and playing with paradoxes specifically to appropriate an experience that exceeds conceptual categories and the traditional code of everyday signs. This is what is happening in this. He's trying to speak to that, assume the accomplished himself, inasmuch as he desires to assume the accomplished fact himself, thereby rendering it unaccomplished by rewilling it. The language of responsibility. We must assume our facticity, to quote Sartre a little bit. Nietzsche, who's not responding to Sartre, I probably shouldn't have done that. I bring all of them together because it's always fun to sort of discuss, but that's not the point. Sorry, I apologize. This is not merely accepting the past as given. Instead, it is willing the past as if one chose it. When Nietzsche says to love fate, amor fati, to have a love of fate, he means to affirm and love fate. He means to affirm and love, to accept and actively affirm what you used to passively suffer from. This is amor fati. And it's a lot because, I mean, obviously on its own, I'm not going to be able to get into what amor fati means and how it works, but if you're going to spend your life very upset about how you got to where you're at, enjoy that. The changing of this to re-will it as if you willed it, as if one had chose it. This is the core of the idea. He then says, rendering it, thereby rendering it unaccomplished by re-willing it innumerable times. This accomplished fact has its character as accomplished, as completed, precisely because of the way that time is perceived, this fixed, irreversible past, by willing it innumerable times. Zarathustra is dissolving this finality, and he doesn't dissolve it by changing what happened. That's not the point. It's about changing its ontological status from accomplished to eternally recurring. Now, the phrase here, though, inasmuch as he desires to assume the accomplished fact himself, desires to assume is this conditional language Klossowski adds in here, right? The conditional, intentional modality of this is that this is a project. This is an aspiration. This isn't quite an achievement. And as much as he desires to assume, the implication here is that this is something that is in process of being defined. The multiplication of willing mirrors the mirror multiplication we just talked about. But here it's almost a strategy rather than an overwhelming experience. You might, I brought up Spinoza. It wasn't out of nowhere. We're kind of talking about the love of knowledge, the love of the intellectual, the amor de intellectualis, Spinoza's third kind of knowledge, where understanding transforms necessity to freedom. Nietzsche's doing this not through intellect, though, because that's like the old version of this. For him, for a lot of thinkers since then, the impulses, the drives, the forces at work here, the desire, libido, whatever, this is what we're attempting it through. Because Klossowski is going to be actually showing there are specific problems if we do it with intellect. Will is different. We can have that conversation. It plays differently. And this is kind of going to be where Klossowski is taking Nietzsche, I would say, like as a preview. Such a ruse removes the once and for all character from the event. The once and for all character, that terrible German word that I probably mispronounced earlier. The ruse that he's talking about here is what Zarathustra is attempting, what I just described, the amor fati attempt, all of this. It's a deception, a ruse, a trick, a cunning and clever bullshit, right? There's, again, playing towards such a ruse, an attempt, a play around this. We're going to get to this in the next paragraph, but just remember, this is a ruse. It's a ruse that undoes the once and for all. It removes that character. Really important as a thing. This is the subterfuge, the experience of Silmarie, which is in itself unintelligible, first offers on reflection. So now it's subterfuge. This is a direct evasion. This is avoidance. This is playing in very particular ways. This is a very different pieces. One of the best little pieces on Amor Fati and topical for the new year. Oh, it is so good. I should do a reading of that. I'm going to read it right now. I am still alive. This is a 276. I want to say this is gay science. Is this gay science? I think this is gay science. Okay, good.
Yes.
All right. Gay science 276. For the new year. I am still alive. I am still thinking. I must remain alive, for I must continue thinking. Sum, ergo cogito, cogito, ergo sum. Today, everyone is allowed to express their fondest thoughts and wishes. Well, I too want to say what it is that I have wished for myself today. What thought first crossed my mind at the beginning of the year, a thought with which I may justify and to which I shall pledge the rest of my life, a thought to render my life sweet. I want to come to regard everything necessary as beautiful, so that I will become one of those who makes everything beautiful. Amor fati. From now on, let that be my love. I do not want to wage war against the ugly. I do not want to accuse anyone. I do not even want to accuse the accusers. May averting my eyes be my only negation. All in all, and on the whole, someday I hope only to be an affirmer. Oh yeah, what a negative fucking guy. No wonder he was like totally used by the Nazis. That sounds like Nazi shit to me. I fucking love I love Nietzsche so much. It's like one of the most uplifting passages you could fucking have. Jesus Christ. Man, people. Unreal. Beautiful, though. Thank you for sharing and making me read it, August. Ruse and subterfuge. Just ruse and subterfuge. Just, this is... The Klossowski is saying, hey, Zarathustra's remedy, what we just went over, this ruse that is there, is actually an indirect approach. It is Nietzsche not coming at it directly. He's trying to cleverly go around it, not really fully engaging with the implications of Silmarie, but playing with it. And the line, experience of Silmarie, which is in itself unintelligible, is the point. The primary intensive experience, again, cannot be at all. It cannot be at all translated. It doesn't work as a thing. This doesn't mean that it's difficult to understand. Unintelligible is unintelligible. It's intrinsically unrelated and resistant to intellect in any way. There's no conceptual language for this thing. And so that last line he says here, which is kind of important, this reflection consequently hinges on willing. This is, I mean, it seems like on its face, it's just, he's adding this in here. This is actually like a devastating line. I fucking love Klossowski. Okay. That hinges on, and I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, But hinges on is a good translation for this. I just want to take a moment on that word and that translation. This is not against Daniel Smith, brilliant translator, but it's worth noting. Consequently, hinges on is se articule se, articulates itself around. It's structured by. It's a phrase that's used a lot in these circles in French. So when you say hinges on, the entire conceptual framework depends structurally on willing. It hinges on in English has to me a sort of, it hinges on, and it's like it relies on. No, it's not quite that. It's structured by, articulating around, right? So because of this, it has a strength. By being in the register of the willing, Zarathustra's remedy is intelligible. We can understand this. These are things we can will. These are practicable. These are things you can do, right? If I say re-will the non-will, do these things. Everything I just said, in your head, you're like, oh, I can do these things. These are things you can attempt. It translates an unintelligible experience into this existential practice. And that's, thus spoke Zarathustra, it's the thing that makes it, in my mind. The reason I adore that, and I think also the great flaw of it, but it makes things accessible that seem inaccessible through metaphor, analogy, through narrative, through mythicalization. And if any of you have ever heard me use any of those words in a positive light, you'll know this comes with the other side. Then you're fucking up. Willing is the source of the revenge structure. This reflection, consequently, is built on willing. It hinges on this. That the will is attempting to control temporality, to project agency on past, present, future. That's why it feels great to hear this, to have me tell you, you can do these things. I can, in the future, do these things to change the past. Excellent. I'm so excited about this. So a remedy that hinges on or is structured by willing is complicit with the problems that we are attempting to solve here. The vicious circle has its name like that. The reason this book is called The Vicious Circle and not The Eternal Return, the reason The Eternal Return, he swaps them in and out. It's not all the time. It's not all the time for me. This is the vicious circle. This is the vicious circle. It's part of the eternal return process, all that. But trying to overcome revenge on existence through an act of will perpetuates the revenge structure itself. The vicious circle of the people who violently rise up against fascism. They're producing the very category and the very construction of a system that is necessary for fascism. They're not building against it or building something new. You are building the vicious circle is you're doing the thing, creating the thing, doing the thing, creating, you're stuck in it. This is the vicious circle, by the way. You'll see this very quickly here, and I'm kind of giving spoiler alert, but like, that's the point. This is the vicious circle for Klossowski. Trying to overcome using the very system to perpetuate the thing you're wanting to overcome. So, can you have redemption through will? Or is will itself a thing to be overcome? Zarathustra presumes that there is this strong sovereign subject that can be transformative of their own will, that they are in control, the Ubermensch type shit. But I would argue, I would think Klossowski might argue, that the Silmarie experience is actually exactly the opposite of that. There is no stable subject. There's no sovereign subject in it. It's broken into multiplicity. Does the vicious circle refer to the idea of eternal return? Yes. But that's why they're not the same thing, but they're working the same, or they're the same thing. They play differently. They work slightly differently. They have a different bend, you might say. But the vicious circle is this setup.
Can I say something just like to summarize like what I see as the difference between vicious circle and eternal return
Please,
for
please.
Klossowski?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it seems to me that basically Klossowski wants to take the impulse, which he says is kind of like a lust to rule, and sort of put it through this process of like materializing it into the phantasm, and then but not stop there. He takes it further and then creates a kind of simulacrum and then a stereotype. And the stereotype is like a way of completing the vicious circle and returning it back to the impulse. So in a way, it's kind of like channeling. You're channeling this impulse and you're making it so the will is sort of kind of like a theater, almost like a theater of cruelty, where that's the difference I see between Klossowski and Nietzsche, is that he ends up seeing the dominance of a single impulse. He sees it as being something that's a process or like a symptom you have to understand. And what the stereotype does is it kind of like pokes fun at the various different phantasms that you have in life.
I think that's because it's one of those things that it's a little bit of a square rectangle thing. Like every square is a rectangle, but not every rectangle. Like there are differences that are built out. I would almost say, because I like how you phrase it. I think I would, if I had to try to make it more concise, I'd probably say something like the eternal return is the doctrine that all events and configurations recur infinitely and have recursion. This is the what that is being thought, but the thinking of the eternal return is the vicious circle, because comprehending the eternal return, which is a vicious circle, requires undergoing the very self-dissolution it describes. And somehow there's no stable you to possess thought. And so there's basically an inherent performative contradiction built into what the eternal return is. So it is a vicious circle. And it's not the vicious circle. I mean, I think I probably said that. It's close enough. It's fine. But again, it's not metaphor. It's a structural thing. The structure of the eternal return, the way it is thought, is a vicious circle. It's always recursive, always coming back on itself. But the reason that the book's titled this way is because the thought circles back on its own thinking and forces that and constantly dumps into itself. So there's a structural impossibility in the thing that is directly experienced ongoing. And so it's, by having recursivity without stable ground, we build the vicious circle in thought. So it's, yeah. This stuff's so fun to talk about. Sorry, this is the fun stuff. This is the fun stuff. I'm glad we got that. And by the way, Mike, I don't know if have you not joined us before? How the fuck have you not joined us before? Unless you changed your name.
I pop in every now and then, but when COVID first started, I kind of found the Quarantine Collective, and I usually don't participate. I kind of just watch.
I was just looking. I was like, wait, when did you join? I was like, what the fuck? I was so confused for a second. I was like, oh, nice, new person. Not new person. It was just a very strange moment in my brain as I'm looking you up. I was like, what the fuck? Thank you for joining. Glad you're back around. And loved the comment. That was fantastic. It gave me things to think about. I love it. Welcome.
Yeah, I've kind of like dipped in and out of Klossowski, and his system is quite interesting.
I love it.
Kind of want to. Eventually, I want to read La Baphomet. I haven't really gotten into it, but like I feel like that's an expression of notion of stereotype, where he kind of takes the impulse, and kind of like dissimulates it in a way so that it can return back into the pre-individuated like impulsive things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's.
Have you read that book?
We had a reading of Baphomet, actually, led by Jack. It was one of the third readings, because it's mentioned in Logic of Sense. There's a Klossowski passage in the extended version of Logic of Sense. And so we're like, I think in the second year of the QC, we had a reading of Baphomet Jack read, which was amazing. Also, and it hasn't been fully translated. I technically have translated it, but I'm not happy with it yet, so I'm working on it. But The Resemblance is a piece he wrote in 84 that is about the function of the simulacra in language and writing, and also about the exercising function of the simulacrum in pictorial communication. And it's Bataille and fucking Arnaud and like it's crazy. All the stuff it goes into. I feel like, oh, fuck it. Here, I'm just going to put a link in and you can read and comment all you want.
That's interesting, pictorial communication, because like it just makes me think of his later stuff where he kind of stopped doing philosophy and was more into like gestures and like arts. He kind of went into like a little bit of a silence thing toward the end of his career, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, and it's only like 40 pages. I'm going to post the Google link. There's edits in there and stuff. Feel free to make comments as you feel. Anyone can do that. It is not a perfect translation. There's a lot of stuff that I like couldn't quite get myself, so other people helped, and then I ended up redoing, and then a couple of things were run through Google because it was just easier for me. Like it was a practice session because it's a beast, but it's beautiful writing. Like it's Klossowski, and I really hope I did well with it, but Klossowski's writing is stunning. And I'm trying to find one specific passage that came to mind with what you said. This is from my translation, so I'm not reading the French. To submit to the censorship of classical syntax, that is, its logical rigor, exclusive of all contradictory propositions, in the image of anomalies, amounts precisely to reproducing the obsessional constraint of the incommunicable phantasm. Such was the lesson of Sod for me. Practiced wisely, institutionalized stereotypes of syntax provoke the presence of what they circumscribe. Their circumlocutions conceal the incongruity of the phantasm and simultaneously trace the contour of its opaque physiognomy. Hence the effect of disproportion between phantasmatic incongruity and its localization in the stereotyped terms that exhibit it under the pretext of hiding it. I mean, it's literally what you're talking about. I think this essay is like exactly what you're speaking of, because it's My Neighbor Sod, and he also has Robert Sessois and a few things he's written. It's about hospitality, which is like manners, which is like Confucianist. It's really a weird direction to have Western stuff take, but for him, Sod is a lot about that. But these are things we can't communicate. Manners can't be communicated. Laws of hospitality can't really be communicated. They're a phantasm. And so how the fuck does that work? And this entire piece is him building the logic of that. And it's, I'm still, again, most of it is not as eloquent as I want it, because it doesn't, but I think it gets across pretty nicely. Do give critiques as you want, though. How is phantasm different from images or simulacra in mind? So there's again, every semiotic structure. So when I say this is not me saying phantasm always means this, because Deleuze runs with it slightly differently early on. Klossowski runs with it slightly differently early on too. Simulacra and simulacrum are their own fucking thing across every philosopher. For Klossowski, the very simple version is the forces of the world, the vibrations of things, you could say, the impulse, the way there are waves on the water, there's waves in everything. They're constantly colliding, canceling each other out, hitting each other. There's an incredible complexity to them. There's an odd bend. We went through this actually 4 or 5 readings ago. It's because he goes through it lightly in this book, not as clearly as I want, but he goes through it lightly. These vibrations, there's a weird moment where in their like collision of things, there's a little bit separate. There's a tracing left behind. And it's not a permanent tracing. Think of it as the way that waves on the sand wash things away. It's not all in one go. It takes a whole bunch to do it, and then it smooths it out. But also maybe it doesn't. Maybe it digs. Maybe it erodes, does things over time. There's this constant pulsing of the impulses in and out. As this happens, those things in time themselves become almost... the impulses become aware of them. And aware is probably the wrong word, but they can interact with them. They see them because the recordings and the digits, the things in time sort of pull against it. What happens at that stage is that we basically, as the impulses gain the sign, and that is kind of what he calls it at that point, the sign of it. And again, it's more of an indice than anything else, the sign of that tracing as it happens over and over, as it sort of is the divot on your cheek that you can't stop tonguing that's kind of there over and over. This happens at large and over. We have these signs that then grow. But this is still internal, and I'm fully more or less aware of all of these sensations, not what they mean, but I'm aware of all of these things that coming together that sort of coalesce in me, but I can't talk about them. The step of me turning them first into all of this craziness to these specific recordings as I understand them, and then communicating them takes a step of me turning them into, oh God, am I going to get it backwards? I feel like I'm going to get it backwards. The phantasms, as I understand, the phantasms are what I understand of myself. So when I say I am hungry, I don't even say that. Fuck that. A child experiences hunger. They experience it as a totality, and it's a consistent collection of all of these sort of structures and traces and indices all at once. And it varies over time, but they experience these things. They find it satiated by hunger over and over. And so they start understanding this connects to that. These are how these things piece together. They're told the word is hunger. This phantasm of hunger that is internal has to be communicated externally. The communication element, which is the word used, is the simulacra. I create a simulacra to communicate to you that I am hungry. That word doesn't do justice at all to even my internal phantasms, but I have to communicate, and as such, I communicate outward. So the emergent processes, impulses create tracings of themselves, interact with them, the phantasms of them are born, and then the subject that is born of the phantasms and the collectivity of that communicates outward, utilizing the simulacra, which is basically a copy of that thing that doesn't have the same libidinal quality, the same life force, the same vitality, and as such is communicated more cynically. Am I saying phantasm is emergent from a set of drives interaction with language, produce images? Yes. I mean, I think it's a more eloquent version of what is in Anti-Oedipus, but that's just me, and do not take that fully as a thing. So feel free to go, no, that's stupid, Brooks. Very possible. I wanted to get to this next paragraph. So bad. Feel like we're going to do that. I'm going to do that. We're going to do one more paragraph, then I'm done. I think that'll be fine. Yeah, we'll do that. I've got to take the kids. Yep, that'll be fine. We've got 30 minutes, and then I've got to stop. Does anyone else have a comment or anything else before we dive forward? Wish we had an analogy. We don't do analogies. That's the problem, is the analogies, because they utilize simulacra. Like for Klossowski, this is Deleuze too. He doesn't use the same term for it. But because they use that language, they necessarily don't have all of the complexity and components that are part of it. They're flattened into pure representation. When we're dealing with representation, we're able to stretch it across many things. What is hunger to me is not the same thing as what hunger is to a poor child in the middle of the desert in Africa. I'm peckish. Now it's a different thing, but hunger doesn't mean the same thing. The analogy can be stretched or shrunk to fit a billion different things. This is how you can have moments where there are people genuinely who believe the woman who was killed yesterday by ICE, murdered by an ICE agent, is a domestic terrorist. This is how you end up in that place, is representational thought. How is this Klossowski different? Deleuze doesn't really do an interpretation of eternal return at this depth at all. And I don't think he wanted to, because I think this book fucking is very good. And I think he recognized that. He loved the Klossowski. They were good buddies. He loved the Klossowski. Klossowski loved him too. Dedicated it. I have one of my French copy here. Dedicated. He loved the Deleuze. He really loved Deleuze. It's one of those things. It's, again, personal thoughts after reading all of Deleuze. Had a whole bunch of secondary writings, interviews, but he had this frustration with Foucault that he was never able to connect with Foucault, who he was, I think, closer friends with, but never really philosophically. They did not agree on a lot, and I think that he did here. Like there's so much of this is just anti-Oedipus to me. It's kind of wild. But let's read. Such a ruse. Back to the ruse. Remember ruse? Such a ruse, however, is only one way of eluding the temptation inherent in the very reflection on the eternal return. Non-action, which Zarathustra rejects as a fallacious remedy, nonetheless implies the same inversion of time. If all things return according to the law of the vicious circle, then all voluntary action is equivalent to a real non-action, or all conscious non-action is equivalent to an illusory action. At the level of conscious decision, not to act corresponds to the inanity of the individual will. It expresses the intensity of the high tonality of the soul as much as does the decision to pursue an action. How could the re-willing of the past be creative? To adhere to the return is also to admit that only forgetting enabled us to undertake old creations as new creations, ad infinitum. Formulated at the level of the conscious self, identical to itself, the imperative of re-willing would remain tautology. For it seems that this imperative, even though it demands a decision for eternity, concerns the will's behavior only during the interval of an individual life, and that the past, the non-willed, the riddle of the dreadful chance, is what we live through every day. This is going to absolutely take me a half hour. Fuck it, let's do it. All right, let's go. Such a ruse, however, is only one way of eluding the temptation inherent in the very reflection on the eternal return. Non-action, which Zarathustra rejects as a fallacious remedy, nonetheless implies the same inversion of time. Klossowski is like, hey, this is only one way. This is kind of a hint of things to come, by the way. This ruse is only one way. There's others, actually. But specifically, this response is a way of avoiding a pull towards non-action. Zarathustra speaks polemically, angrily, against Buddhist-style detachment from the world. I am not of this world, I'm above it and beyond it. Non-action bullshit. He's very, very against this. Zarathustra is not a fan, to just say lightly. Also, kind of in my mind, addressing Schopenhauer, right? Schopenhauer had this resignation as part of his setup. Nietzsche called it passive nihilism, which everyone ascribes to Nietzsche, which is fucking weird as a thing. Core idea. If everything occurs and recurs eternally, then why do anything? Oh, if everything's already set to happen, then whatever you do is fine, so do nothing. Just let the wheel turn, just let the gears go. That is not a thing for Zarathustra. That is not a thing for Nietzsche. It's not a thing for Klossowski, to be very frank. The entire thing is that, as he says here, Klossowski says, a fallacious remedy nonetheless implies the same inversion of time. That's the same temporal inversion as re-willing. The vicious circle, again, rears its head. This is the same thing. The attempt to address revenge structure and will's powerlessness before time by utilizing them. But remember, okay, re-willing is an active response. You will affirm what has been. Non-action, cease willing altogether. Both of these things attempt to overcome time's irreversibility. But this, and Zarathustra calls it a fallacious remedy, right? This non-action, because it's a deceptive medicine, fallacious remedy. It appears to solve the problem, but it's perpetuating the problem. The vicious circle. It's one way of eluding the temptation inherent in the very reflection. Klossowski's words are so fucking exact. Again, I can't help but read it this way. Do your own deal. Go watch Essential Salts. In thinking the eternal return, we experience the vicious circle, the temptation inherent in the very reflection on the eternal return. Because reflection reveals the futility of all action within the eternal recurrence. So the temptation shows up. This is, again, the same thing. And he goes on. If all things... Sorry, let me just... If all things return according to the law of the vicious circle, then all voluntary action is equivalent to a real non-action, or all conscious non-action is equivalent to an illusory action. Did that highlight? Close enough. Close enough. Close enough. Hey, look, it's a fucked up paradox again. Voluntary action means real non-action. Sorry, someone wanted to say something.
Well, I was just gonna say it's always like the high tonality of the soul, just the phantasm is a way of incommunicable. This sort of breaks that symmetry of like just return of like a vicious return. Like that's the signature that's sort of like it can't be captured in communication, and it needs to be experienced. It can't be understood metaphysically.
Yeah. Yes. And it's the action and non-action becoming fundamentally equivalent, and this symmetry of it from the perspective of the eternal return is, and I love the simple phrasing here. I literally would take probably 3 pages to write this. All voluntary action equivalent to real non-action, all conscious non-action equivalent to illusory action. This is since we're talking a little bit about representation, I saw your question in chat on YouTube, John. Deleuze's critique of representation is literally the same thing. This is it. It's the reliance on oppositional categorization, identity versus difference, same versus other, action versus passivity. By doing one of those, by doing action or non-action, by picking one, I choose to act, I choose not to act, by choosing identity over difference or difference over identity. By doing this, you're actually reinforcing the very structure that you're trying to overturn in the other thing. That the point of intensive ontology as a thing is that there's only differential degrees of force and power. There's no such thing as a categorical distinction between acting and non-acting, fundamentally. And not as a hint where this is going, that's where this is fucking going. It's action through non-action. It's non-action through action. It's understanding that there is no difference between the two. It's playing and in this, again, the thinking of the eternal return, the return is the breaking of this. The breaking of this dichotomy, because there is no action or non-action, since everything does recur necessarily. All voluntary action is equivalent to real non-action, and all conscious non-action is equivalent to illusory action. To just continue, because fucking has just worked great. At the level of conscious decision, Oh, fucking stupid thing. All right. At the level of conscious decision, boop, boop. Not to act corresponds to the inanity of the individual will. It expresses the intensity of the high tonality of the soul as much as does the decision to pursue an action. What? But you're deciding to pursue an action. That's the idea of individual will, the inanity of it. Such a fucking good way to put it. The emptiness, the futility of individual will at the level of conscious decision making. Choosing non-action reveals that it's fundamentally an empty thing anyway, that lacks individual ground. But this is not a dismissal. He's not just tossing these things out. The complication comes in the second half of this, that both action and non-action express the intensity, God, I love this, of the high tonality of the soul. Literally what you just said, by the way. Klossowski's just repeating what you just said. Isn't that awful? He stole from you. The high tonality of the soul that he's talking about here, that introduce it's playing with the intensive register that operates beneath conscious choice. I've always loved tonality, the tonality thing, and it's why a lot of the words and jargon that I think come out of these guys, a good number of them touch into musical elements and sound and waves. Resonance is huge for Deleuze. One sec. Ritournelle is huge. Not refrain. Refrain is a mistranslation. Ignore those people. Ritournelle, great use. The way that these things operate is not in a note or in a thing. There's something else going on that's sort of before the notes or even after the notes or underneath. And like the musical use of these terms. Intensity is this qualitative pitch of things. It's an affective coloring of sound. It isn't a quantitative element. High tonality is about this elevated, heightened state. And that thing that he's referring to as he talks here, this expression of this intensity, a conscious choice is epiphenomenal. It's that acting or non-acting that's not the point. You're already downstream. If you're like, oh, acting or non-acting, that's the thing I care about. No. Those things are equally expressing the intensive state. Whether you choose non-action or action, they both can, it's important phrasing, can manifest from the same intensive fluctuation. So this is like a radical decentralization of consciousness, which is kind of important to all these guys also, by the way. Super important. Really, really, really important. But not to go into Zen and old Taoism or anything, but there are some great lines you can pull that sort of touch into this, because it doesn't matter what you do downstream. If you're concerned with what is downstream, if you're like, well, I need to choose which is the better choice for me, which is the better outcome, you're missing the point. The line I used it last week and I'll continue to use it. It's one of my favorite old lines. The mistake you're making is that you're already enlightened and you don't know it. It's one of my favorite lines, way. And that is kind of the point. You're already doing these things. Your consciousness is produced by the very same forms that are doing this. By having and staying in that register of, oh, I need to choose action or non-action. You're missing that all of this has been constructed, and understanding all of these things and all these forces that have been at play that are expressing themselves through what appears as your choice. You can be very angry about all these things, this emergent process, and be very pissed and go, well, I want to act or not act as a defiance or whatever. Or you can understand these forces and join with them and allow these odd sort of thing. We'll get into what that means in a little bit, but this is a radically different thing when it comes to how consciousness sort of operates. And again, this is Spinoza's conatus. This is Nietzsche's will to power. This is the intensive differences of Deleuze. And to be perfectly frank, this is actually modern cognitive science. decisions precede your awareness of them. If you didn't know that, we've learned that, like there are studies that show this. So of course they've justified it in a whole other way, but hey, look at that. We've kind of figured out a few of these things, and they sort of play out. And he continues. How, nope, wrong one, Brooks. There you go. How could the rewilling of the past be creative? To adhere to the return is also to admit that only forgetting enabled us to undertake old creations as new creations ad infinitum. I have 2 videos on this. The resentment one is great, but I have a lot of videos on how forgetting is incredibly important. And we increasingly live in a world that doesn't allow us to forget. Data is forever, pictures are forever, everything's forever, always now. So we can't really forget. And as such, it's creating a very specific type of person and subjectivity these days. But the power of forgetting is something that we really need to spend some time on, because for Nietzsche, forgetting is the same as taking a shit, basically. You digest thought, you digest memories, you digest experience. These things go through and then they leave, and you're left with nutrients and you're left with pieces. You digest life this way. And your mind, your experience of the world, if you do not forget, his terminology is it makes you a dyspeptic, which I always love that they've translated it that way. It makes you someone who farts and shits and belches a lot and makes you vomit all the time. It makes you sick mentally in that way, because there's not a lot of difference. If you can't pass things on, it makes you dyspeptic in all of these ways. Forgetting is incredibly important. And so when we talk about Zarathustra or Nietzsche, forgetting is like one of the most important things. And as we've talked about already in this book, when Nietzsche wrote about the eternal return, forgetting is like the most important thing. Like it's incredibly important to the process for him. You will forget that you were here, and you will come back again, and you will forget again. The very act of returning to the code of everyday signs is forgetting the eternal return, and joining the eternal return is forgetting all of that. Forgetting is the condition of creativity within the eternal return. Only by forgetting that we have done this before are we even capable of experiencing old creations as new ad infinitum. Have you ever rewatched a movie from your childhood? I suggest you do 1 or 2. Go watch, figure out what year you were born, what was around when you were 5, what was the most popular film. You undoubtedly probably saw it. Go rewatch it. See if it's what you remember. It won't be. You will experience it entirely differently because you've forgotten what you thought when you were 5. Even if you remember emotionally some things, it's not going to sit the same with you. The novelty of the experience is there because you forgot. I know we live in a time where people will watch things 1,000 times. I feel that. I've been that. They want to memorize every line. They want to be able to say every fact, know every single thing. Cinema sins is basically the sin of all of this. They'll read books 1,000,000 times. They'll be able to quote things, and they believe themselves to have more knowledge as such. But they're engaging with it a first time and then forcing themselves to never forget, trying to never forget, holding on to these broken sandcastles of memories that just fade in time because we still do forget. There's only so much you can do. But these things being forgotten enable us to deal with the thing again. I go through, we're about to start in a week and a half, just under 2 weeks. We'll be starting our 4th reading of Anti-Oedipus on this channel. 4th reading of Anti-Oedipus. And when I say it is like I've never read the book before every time I read it, I mean it. I mean it. And it should be for everyone. That process is always growing new, building new, enabling new. This is not salvation through amnesia. If you are aware and constantly thinking about that you've forgotten these things, you're aware of those things. This is about understanding and having a consciousness that doesn't know that this is repeating. I can go through this at length. That's my angry rant against remembering shit. Memory is not the best thing in the world, and it's destructive in all reality. Yeah, fundamentally. But it's not how we work, so it's fine. Because, and again, forgetting is not, and Klossowski goes through this, forgetting is not like a dissolving, right? Because that's also how people think. Food goes in your stomach, it dissolves away, and then some of it becomes shit. No, it breaks down and parts are reabsorbed. It takes on other forms. This is the same fucking thing. When you take stuff in, your brain does with it and your body does with it. You take it in and you digest it, and parts may remain, little flashes of this or that or things, but you digest it. It is the necessary structuration of things. It's not a deficiency. It's an affirming process. It is what enables cycles of things to exist, and every cycle to feel original, every moment to feel original. It's a temporal newness that's sort of just part and parcel of how we have to do things and the best parts of things. And that's the thing, Zarathustra's remedy. If creativity requires forgetting, Zarathustra's remedy of re-willing the past kind of contradicts the very conditions of creativity itself. So like consciously remembering and re-willing past events would eliminate the idea of forgetting that enables those things to be experienced anew. Zarathustra said this contradiction outright. There's a reason, by the way, the book's awesome. Zarathustra's entire imperative conflicts with apparently his own thing. And he does this. And Nietzsche wrote on the uses and disadvantages of history for life. This is a gay science, beyond good and evil. He writes about this a lot, but too much historical memory paralyzes your actions. The Eternal Return, though, radicalizes even that thought, because it's not just historical memory. It's an ontological memory. Knowing that you have had this thought before always would be lethal to anything creative. Period. So he goes on. True. I'm not going to be able to highlight because it goes to the next page. That's fine. Boop. Get rid of you. Boop. Boop. No. Okay. Formulated at the level of the conscious self, down here at the bottom, identical to itself, the imperative of re-willing would remain a tautology, for it seems that this imperative, even though it demands a decision for eternity, concerns the will's behavior only during the interval of an individual life, and that the past, non-willed riddle of dreadful chance, is what we live through every day. Calling Zarathustra tautological is pretty hilarious, and I kind of dig that he's doing that here. And again, that's how I read it. You can do your own reading. I don't give a fuck. For those, tautology is a statement that is true by virtue of its logical form itself, but kind of says nothing substantive. Tautology, like the law of identity for Aristotle, A equals A. Yay. Well, thank you for that. And it kind of then builds, it's tautological and builds backwards. Klossowski argues here that re-willing, when framed in this way, this is the phrasing he's got, formulated at the level of the conscious self, identical to itself, the imperative of re-willing would remain a tautology. It's because you have on the one side, self-identity that is presupposed as part of this, the stable I that's able to decide to re-will. That's a problem. But because the Eternal Return dissolves self-identity, this then creates this sort of weird thing where the level of the conscious self identical to itself, re-willing a second self. How the fuck does any of this work? It becomes a performative contradiction, though. The I who would appropriate the eternal return is precisely what the eternal return is negating the existence of, which kind of empties any of this from having sort of a meaning beyond just the words it's saying, which is, again, what Zarathustra is doing, what Nietzsche is trying to do with Zarathustra. He's pulling this out because it can't be, the eternal return can't be talked about in a doctrinal sense. This is why he's saying Nietzsche is doing this and having all of these contradictions, violating every one of his own principles, even as he's stating paradoxes. That this is the point for him. The experience itself dissolves structure. The tautology that is being spoken of as you're reading it, and I can't be the only person who read it this way. It's like, oh, fuck, that's said you have paradox that you deal with and that your brain has to sort of fuck with. And it reveals on its face the limitations of linguistic conceptual frameworks by stating this. This is a Zen koan. I've always taken Zarathustra to be closer to a Zen koan type thing because it's playing with contradictions and paradoxes in a way that the words itself aren't the point. I don't know. There are people who say Zarathustra is like actually meant to be prophet-like, and it's like, okay, I don't think that's what Nietzsche's doing, maybe. But to me, it's always been the way that Zarathustra is written is about explicating things incommunicable by stating contradictions from the jump. I've always read it that way. This is, to me, the most interesting reason that would be the case is because Nietzsche's trying to get across this vicious circle, the reality of the vicious circle, that you hit a point where the sign language, the world of everyday signs, the system of everyday signs can't go further. And because you end up in this self-referential, endless hall of mirrors that is because it exists pre-sign. So the only way to get back to that is to play with these paradoxes, is to dive into these things. And that's, I think, what he's saying on the next bit, the thing following. For it seems that this imperative, even though it demands a decision for eternity, concerns the will's behavior only during the interval of an individual life, and that the past, the non-willed, the riddle of dreadful chance, is what we live through every day. Again, the paradoxical temporal confusion that Zarathustra's remedy shows is what's fucked up here. The imperative is on a person, but it's also an imperative for eternity. So it's beyond my life, but it's about my life and what I can do. But wait, how can a decision made in my lifetime have implications eternally? If I'm going to re-will everything eternally during my life, the fuck bearing would that have on the infinity of past and future iterations where I don't exist? The past, the non-willed, the riddle of dreadful chance. We live through the past consequences. Your past, right now, you, as a present thing, are constituted by your childhood, any trauma you've experienced, historical inheritances of all sorts, not just a literal familial inheritance as a thing. The biology evolutionary on the uniquely weird corner of the universe in this cosmic history that exists. You don't need the eternal return doctrine to encounter things that are not willed. You live that every fucking day. The past, this is what we live through every day. You face it constantly. You are born of it. This is the non-willed. The phrasing, the riddle of dreadful chance, is a direct reference to Zarathustra as well. The dreadful chance from Redemption on the way chance works out. where you are. He's making it's a fucking gallows humor dark joke about chance. Chance is the thing that lacks necessity, that escapes causal explanation, that resists comprehension. And Zarathustra, in extracting this thing and talking about all of this, is trying to address this eternal recurrence. But the actual operation is limited to this weird accepting daily contingencies, misfortunes, like the modern interpretation of Stoicism, right? And then people do this with Nietzsche. The right wing do this with Nietzsche. This weird stoic, cosmic, I can handle it, therapeutic bullshit technique. Which, good. If it works for you, happy day. I don't give a fuck. I'm not here for that. Enjoy yourself. To me, that falls short of the point of this experience that is so radically transformative and what it promises in the rest of Nietzsche's writings and in Klossowski's writings too. So I'll leave you with this because I'm going to be ending here because that's a solid almost 2.5 hours we're about to hit. There is a recognition here that you cannot appropriate the eternal return through conscious willing during an individual's lifetime. There's something more radical happening than just saying that, though. Perhaps the dissolution of consciousness into intensive processes beyond the framework we just described is where he's heading, and where Nietzsche was heading, and where I would argue Zarathustra is heading to. That's how I would phrase all of that. Yeah. Yeah. I like Zarathustra. I highly recommend it. Thank all of you for joining. This has been lovely. I'm going to go grab the kiddos. Let me see who's live. Is there anyone live right now so I can throw you at someone? Fuck. The ice thing really ruined my fucking day yesterday. I don't know about everyone else. Oh, Rod, you came back just in time for me to send you to someone else. Yesterday ruined my day. That was really, really just awful. Just fucking.
Unfortunately, this will probably be the last vicious circle I can make it to in a while because of my school schedule.
Well, that is awful to hear. But I understand that. The good news is it's online. You'll be able to go and say, hey, what about this? That'll be lovely.
Yeah. I'll definitely have I'll be writing some notes.
Well, there's no one live. So let's see. Who do I send you to when there's no one live? It's the same thing as always. We're going to raid into Peppa Pig. That's right. We're going to go raid Peppa Pig. Thank all of you very much. Have I got a vid on Nietzsche on Ubermensch? I do not, because of all the problems. Because of all the problems. Because of all the problems. I think that's Nietzsche is problematic in and of itself. Like when I did my Resentiment video, or when I did my critique of Abigail's horrifying video on Nietzsche, just a silly number of comments and people joining were like, hey, you ever watch Essential Salts? Which seems to be one of the go-tos. Like the guys at Acid Horizon have him teaching a class on Nietzsche that is just a lot of money. And he has not only a horrifying understanding of Nietzsche, but it's a reactionary one. And it's misinformed on multiple levels. He did a reading of this book that is unfucking real. And it's $200. I know, Alex, it's insane to me. I just am like, great. When you start talking about things like Resentiment, it tends to get a particular audience. If I were to talk about Ubermensch or Will to Power, I know the audience that brings in. And if I'm going to do that, I have to craft it in a particular way. And I have no interest in doing that, so I haven't done one yet. Someone referred to it today regarding the ice killing. What the fuck are you talking? That ruined my day. Thank you, Brett. Yeah, $200 is more than a full community college course. Correct. It's more than most courses, actually. And again, he's not a good reader of Nietzsche. He's not. And I say this, again, autodidacts, I have nothing against. I am one. This isn't my jam. I didn't go to college. But, like, there's a humility that needs to come with engaging with anything that is this complex, this old, and this huge, that I think most people just don't have as a thing. No, don't worry, Brett. It's okay. It's not your fault. It's just that sentence just made my brain hurt. But if you can't hear them, they're running around. It's time for me to go dad the shit out of this place. Would I recommend James Williams' Introduction to Difference? I recommend just reading Difference and Repetition. It has a reputation. Aldous and Guattari and a lot of these guys have a reputation of being incredibly complicated. And so there is, sure, if you want to go in, prepare, go read a bunch of introductions. I think, one, I tend to think that's the worst thing you can do unless you are not the type who can handle doing that. The specific thing, read it and read it for the text. And when you don't understand something, go find out about it. Don't try to think in your head, oh, I probably have a good... No, you don't. None of us do. Go read other texts. Deleuze wrote a lot around DNR. We have a lot of secondary texts on DNR. We have a lot of really, really good shit on it. You can just dive in. Anti-Oedipus is the same thing. Just go do it. And then, as you're going, read the philosophers he's talking about. You don't have to read everything Kant ever wrote, but Critique of Pure Reason should be basic reading for anyone who's doing philosophy. I read that when I was in high school. I didn't fully grasp it, but you should read these things. If you haven't read that stuff, you should read it because these guys are building on those things. It's the same. No one teaches mathematics by telling kids how calculus works. The mathematical concepts to get to that position take a lot. And pieces go here and here, and these systems and these things layer. And they're not one-to-one. Calculus is here, and it's really complicated. And I'm not just saying it's just very complicated addition, but the principles of calculus are built from the same shit. If you don't start with that, yeah. So science, same thing. No one would just give someone a paper on string theory and go, so now you get physics. No, you shouldn't do that at all. But you start from somewhere and you go, oh, I don't know about that. If you're an autodidact, if you're in school, go to school. Go to school if you can. If you can afford it and you're of the right age, go to college. Go learn things. The degree may not help you in life, but you'll learn things. It's good. If not, this is my system for being an autodidact. It's the way it goes. It's useful. It's useful. Sunday is live right now? I just looked up and he was not. I was about to send you to Peppa Pig. I think I'll raid into Sunday and then go talk to him about politics for a moment. Well, he's not live yet, dickhead. He's scheduled for 20 minutes. Go live now, ass. Upcoming. It says upcoming. If you're an autodidact, this is what I recommend. And it's perfectly fine to be that. But as you do that, there are places you can also go where once you believe you have a grasp of a thing. See, he's like, I'm going live like right now. Oh yeah, that's why I'm live at the moment. Fuck these people not knowing how words work. Poor Sunday. At some point, you will have an understanding and you'll be very proud of yourself. And you should be. Because having anything that is a coherent understanding of these things that you can write out, that you can explicate to someone well, is a challenge. Yes, I'll be done in 2 minutes, don't worry. It's a challenge. But once you have that, go put it somewhere where people will disagree with you. The QC is good for this. In 5 years, I've had people shit all over a lot of my ideas. Other things, they've said, yeah, that's how I get it. It feels amazing. Feels amazing when that happens. Genuinely feels amazing. You need to be able to do that. If you can't handle someone critiquing your ideas or your interpretations of things, if you're so certain as someone who didn't go to college or spend 6 years doing nothing but studying this thing under multiple professors, you take a moment and look through what humility can mean and how understanding actually works. Fundamentally, you need to. And again, I'm not saying this as someone who's like, I'm brilliant. I literally get shit on all the time, and I take it, and I correct myself, and I learn. Do that. Be that. Because that's the thing that we do to learn things. Man, the professors and people with degrees suck also. Yes, but they have like a bet. Let me put it this way. If your professor is a shitty professor and he says Deleuze does X, Y, and Z, you at least have an understanding of that. If you're just a rando and you're just posting on, like me on YouTube, and it's a bunch of randos who are saying, yeah, you're right, you probably aren't. As I said in a comment that got me banned from a subreddit the other day, if a YouTube video, even one of mine, made you fully understand a philosopher, you need to reevaluate what your word understanding means. That's not how that works. That's not how that works. That's not how understanding works. That's the thing. It looks like Sunday might be, one sec. There he is. He's live. I'm going to rate in. You guys enjoy. I'm going to send you over. We're going to talk a little bit about the ICE thing. What's happening with the protest today, how it's going. And just as I was saying to people, there was a vigil last night at the ICE facility here in Portland. I was downtown for. Jordy, Kid Not Ken, really just understands how to put these things together and manage this shit, because it's not easy. You're talking about these guys at the ICE facility were driving out in the middle of stuff. They're filming us. They're laughing as they drive out. We had candles mourning the death of someone who was doing good work, and really, amongst other things. And the Methodist Church, and again, Portland churches are a unique beast. Really, I gave a great talk on it, and it was really nice. And it's a bad day for us. Bad day for Americans. And if you know anyone who is celebrating or saying she deserved this, use it as a way to know who to take out of your life and to not deal with anymore, because they have nothing useful to give you in any capacity. Only awful people would think this is acceptable, even begrudgingly. Only awful people. But with that, I'm going to let you guys on the YouTubes go.
If you have medias on this, I'm doing a series of paintings related to it.
Ooh.
Just let me know.
Yes, I would love that. Join the QC and follow LJ. LJ's series of paintings. That'd be great.
It could be a very classical representation of ones, or it could be somewhat surreal and abstracted ones. It depends on what direction is more impactful. But just let me know.
Yeah. Happily. Right now I'm a little stun locked and sad, dealing with mental things. But that's LJ. Come join the Discord, discord.gg/DGQC. If you like what we do, Patreon's the best way to support it. Keeps a weekly thing going. Weekly allows things to be predictable, allows me to sort of spend a little bit more time doing things, would be lovely. And you do that, patreon.com/DGQC. But otherwise, I will see you all. I'll see you all soon enough. All right, we're clear of the YouTubes.